We are so close to that glass or three of Australian wine. But first, and I've really been looking forward to this one, I do love a panel discussion. This particular panel discussion is hosted by Nick Waterman, Chair of Joint Marketing Group, who is joined on stage by CEO of Wirra, Matt Della MW, Emma Brown, Innovation Manager with Brown Family Wines, and Erin Leggat, CEO of McLaren Vale Grape Wine and Tourism Association. Please join us on stage.
So I think just it wasn't really that clear in the program, but there's not a presentation. There's just a Q&A. And thank you, Katie, for saying that we stand between the audience and a glass of wine. So we need to keep it light and bright. So I think Paul will just flick to you with a question, perhaps.
So again, on Slido, for anybody that's got additional questions, to start us off, Nick, if you could, maybe this best directed to you, can you provide a bit of background on the JMG, or the Joint Marketing Group, how it represents the sector's interests, what are its priorities, how are they identified?
Okay. It might just be worth starting. Some of you may have heard of the JMG. Some of you may not have. Some of you might have a perception of what it is. But it was set in place back in 2022. It was between Australian Grape and Wine and Wine Australia decided that they should have an industry stakeholder advisory group to review the annual operating plans and marketing activities of Paul and his team. I'd stress it's an advisory group. It's not the remit to make final determination of spend and programs, but certainly an opportunity for industry to have a say in the annual operating plans and the marketing activities of Paul and his team. I think it was a really important thing at the time to, there's a lot of feedback from government, both state and federal, that the industry doesn't speak with an aligned voice. And that made it really hard for Paul and his team to try and lock down on programs. So the advisory group comprises of 8 people, and they represent the diversity of the industry. So whether that's commercial wines versus premium wines, cool climate versus warm inland climate, regional associations, small winemakers, larger public companies. It's to try and keep everybody happy, as you can imagine, is really, really hard. And so we robustly debate some of the programs that Paul and his team are implementing. But at the end of the day, we come out with a united front in terms of the way forward that can accommodate everybody. It's only we meet 4 times a year, and I think indicative of the importance placed on it. Both Martin Cole from Wine Australia and Lee McLean, the CEO of Australian Grape and Wine, attend pretty much every single meeting. And some of you may remember the days when it'd be hard to put Wine Australia and Australian Grape and Wine in the same room. But certainly those 2 organisations work really closely together, and some of the activities have come out of that as a result. Given that Wine Australia can't lobby, but Australian Grape and Wine can lobby, so things around lobbying, and then if we secure funding, or Paul and his team secure funding, where is that best applied? And some of that's played out with things like the market managers in South Korea and Japan and Vietnam that we had for a little while. It's a long answer, but I think probably good for everyone just to know what the remit is.
Yep, there's a few more that have come in. Anonymous is still prolific. Where are we? And I'm not sure who wants to take this. How does the JMG ensure Wine Australia is representing the sector's interests?
Well, I guess we do that by the diversity of the people on the committee, so or the advisory group. So as I've said, that there's 8 people representing the various parts of the industry. What we said was, by all means, let's have really deep discussion and robust debate, as I said, but we should land in a place where everyone thinks that their sector or their part of the industry is looked after, and we made it pretty clear to anybody that comes on the advisory committee that they have an obligation to take that back to their stakeholder group and network group and socialise the messages and stand behind it. So I think, we've seen examples of that, as you know, Paul, with the Australian wine brand, and that went around maybe 4 or 5 times and had a lot of input from a lot of different places, both the logo, but more importantly, the narrative. So I guess it's a process. It seems to have been working, and but the JMG members are there for people for you to reach out to, and that's happened a couple of times with the small winemakers who thought that they were maybe not getting as much focus as they needed or in the right direction. So I guess that's how it works in practice.
I guess this is a more practical question. You probably touched on it then. So what role did JMG play in the development of it says that we have a wine for that, but it could also be the broader Australian wine campaign? And what was the thinking and the conversations that went behind that?
I think I'll give that to Emma.
I can take that one if you want. Give you a break, Nick. I'm just learning that it's actually really important when Shirley sends you a note asking for a headshot to make sure that she doesn't pull one off the internet. Key learning for next time.
That might have been me.
I feel like with the joint marketing group, it's been a really great process for us to advise Wine Australia and Australian Grape and Wine through this new campaign period. I think there's 3 key things. First of all, I was definitely under the perception that Wine Australia was there in order to support us in export markets predominantly. It's been some time since we've identified an opportunity to support the Australian brand, the Australian wine brand, in domestic market. This was really important this year. We all know that it's a really hard sector to be a part of. We heard all day today that there's declining consumer preference to wine and alcohol. So now more than ever, we need the support in the domestic market. So that was a really key conversation for us to have to make sure that the domestic market was being supported with investment. So the DAF funding, $500,000 to go towards a domestic campaign, was a really key piece in the partnership between the marketing committee and Wine Australia to get that across the board. So I think domestic investment was really key. I think secondly, this is a real turning point of us as an industry to stop talking to ourselves and actually start thinking about the consumer. Now, we're all marketers and we have our passion points, and we certainly love kind of campaign taglines and talking to ourselves. But I think this has been a really key turning point where we've looked at the insights and we've really seen the big O word that's been mentioned so much today, occasion, and actually looking at consumer behaviour and looking at consumer insights and saying, hey, there's a real opportunity for us to be meaningful in the marketplace and actually use these insights to our benefit. So rather than saying Wine Australia Untamed or Wine Australia Drink Us Now, we're actually saying we've got a wine for that, making it really contextually relevant for people in their consumption occasions. And particularly, as we heard a lot today, we're not competing against wine. And I think that that's maybe a misconception of the campaign is, oh, well, we've got 80% penetration, 80% share of the Australian market is actually Australian wine. Are we trying to get that 20% off international brands? Absolutely not. There's 2 opportunities. It's driving frequency, so making sure that people buying Australian wine continue to buy more of it, and also looking at adjacent categories. We heard so much today that within those occasions, wine just isn't being considered for many, many occasions where not only young people but consumers overall are just not considering wine for their key occasions, and particularly those ones that are driving frequency. So I think it's really important, a turning point for Wine Australia and for Australian wine to actually start being consumer-centric, and I think that we have a wine for that has really been that turning point. I think the biggest part from here on in really is how we use it. And a campaign's only as good as kind of how it gets taken off the shelf and actually utilised in the market. So I think that's the third point of really us embracing it as an industry and also giving that feedback. The whole Joint Marketing Committee is all about feedback and making sure that we're getting that feedback off the people who ultimately will be using this campaign and taking it to market and making it meaningful for us.
Well answered. Okay, what have we got? I'll take this one as a comment, but some feedback. It's worth noting as well that as representing sector interests, JMG is a concentration of critical marketing expertise. Go you guys. That we need for international markets. So that's brilliant. And that was actually very much the intention when the JMG was first put together. It was actually bring the expertise from the sector into the room. What does the JMG intend to focus on next?
Kudos to you, Paul, for sitting here all day under these lights. I didn't realise it was so bright up here. It's pretty hard to concentrate. But I think, you know, at last year's update, I asked the question on the one sector plan, what was Wine Australia going to do different? And I didn't imagine that it was going to be a domestic campaign, but I think I really like the domestic campaign. I really like the collaboration with EDG, and I think that provides a really exciting model for what we could do internationally. So I think I have to caveat all of this by I've had one JMG meeting. I'm the newest JMG member. But I agree with that previous comment that aside from myself, it is a collation of the heads of marketing of a lot of the best, most successful wine brands in Australia. So you've got an amazing resource to tap into, and I think the fact that industry was able to weigh in on the on the campaign, I think is fantastic. I think the next step, I think, is to collaborate together and engage together between Wine Australia and the JMG to relook at everything that we're doing internationally and see what can be the game changers in the environment that we're operating in. As we've seen today, it's not easy out there. So if we keep doing the same things and expecting different results, it's the old definition of insanity. So let's see how we can, together come up with ways that can change the game.
Also, I suppose over the last couple of years, the biggest project that the JMG's really had the opportunity to weigh in on was the refresh of the Australian wine brand. And it is a good part of us having such a diverse representation that we knew we had to come up with a brand with Wine Australia that not so much maybe represented every part of the wine industry, but something that everyone could somehow relate to and yet was still appealing to consumers overseas. So I think looking forward, we've now got this open for adventure. We went through many, many iterations of both the Australian wine brand and how it sort of related to the Australian brand in general. We have open for adventure, so it's us working with Wine Australia to work out what's the best way to push that forward in export markets around the world. The other thing we have spoken about a lot is how we push the sustainability story and messaging further in our export markets, particularly developing work around Sustainable Wine Growing Australia in terms of trust mark use and how we really bring that into the brand narrative. So I think that's something the JMG is really looking forward to working on this year.
Given the reaction to We Make a Wine for that, might be something else we need to think about for international markets as well, even campaign-wise. Excuse me. Right, is there a risk that the campaign is utilised by the anti-alcohol lobby to attack wine? Do you have a plan for that? That's probably no. Well, that I probably need to answer that. Look, I think I touched on earlier today that that is a no-win debate. I think we are rightly or wrongly will have a strong perception of conflict in whichever way we take that. I think our view to date is that we just need to stick to our strategy, put in place the plans that we've got in place, and not divert from those plans. So I did say earlier as well, We Make a Wine for That is not about trying to get people to drink more. It's about getting people to choose wine over other alcoholic beverage choices. So I think it's a platform that we can promote hand on heart quite responsibly.
You're probably not going to do We Make a Wine for driving the car or something.
Probably not. Although it's very adaptable, so who knows. Okay. Wine being perceived as a risky purchase has been a common thread. Sorry, and I'm paraphrasing now. I think particularly in on-trade. Is this a marketing problem or a winemaking problem, and what can be done about it?
Is it still? Yeah. I think it's a really great point, and we did see it a couple of times today, that there's a huge amount of risk that comes with wine, particularly for a new-to-wine consumer, and we certainly see that in many parts of the data. I think we have a job to do on how we introduce people to wine. So when we're actually talking about getting people from other categories, how do we actually introduce wine in a really confident way, and a really kind of flavour first way? You see the spritz category, for example. That's one way in which we've demystified the category and actually allowed people to come into wine in a really kind of familiar way, and using flavours that people kind of know what they taste like. Therefore, they become Prosecco drinkers, they might become sparkling wine drinkers, they might become Moscato drinkers, because they've had that first stepping stone into their kind of wine adventure. I think that there's steps like that. There's also, We Make a Wine for That we actually encourage people to consider wine in their occasions that they're not currently doing that, and take away some of that risk. And I think there's a big job. We heard a lot about on-premise today, around how we support the on-premise, and actually the on-premise has historically been a really key channel for us to introduce people to wine for the first time via By the Glass, how we continue to support in on-premise, and making sure that that's a really easy stepping stone for people to try new and different in wine as well.
We're getting the wind-up music. Maybe while you've got the mic, Emma, this might be one you could start on and pass on. Having heard about trends in today's presentations, what does the panel think about opportunities for wine innovation? And certainly Brown Family have been quite innovative over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's exactly that. It's looking at some of those cross-category opportunities, both within kind of how we educate people, but also how we evolve our category to make it more approachable for people. And we break down some of our own perceptions of wine in order to take consumers on that journey. And I think that's easier said than done. We're all wine people in this room, and we kind of inherently know those category cues that we want to play by. But I think we almost need to throw the playbook out and say, if we're committing to this journey for the long term, we're going to have to significantly look differently at wine as a category, and be okay with breaking some of those norms.
I think just to reinforce that, as an industry, we can make wine really intimidating for the consumer, and it's almost a contest as who can, and that's on trade. The gatekeepers and the sommeliers don't necessarily make that job easier for us, but we should aim to take that intimidation away, and I think the domestic campaign aims at doing that. The other thing in terms of packaging, I think one of the early discussions we had as a group was that we should be driven by market insights, and as a result of that, the Consumer Insights Advisory Group, which Pete Bailey runs, has done a number of things, including the on-premise research that was done by Square Hole, and so some of that leads to driving the decisions that are made, because they're informed decisions based on some firm research.
Very true. I'm not sure. I think this is to the JMG, although there's an Endeavour component in this as well. Endeavour noted growth in online wine sales. Are you seeing this across all DDC channels? And how can wineries best position themselves to take advantage? So they're without notice.
What was the first part of the question?
It's saying Endeavour earlier today noted growth in online wine sales.
Yep.
I don't know if it was Endeavour. Was that right? Yep. Are you seeing this across all DTC channels, and how can wineries best position themselves to take advantage?
Yes. Put your brand out there. Leverage social media. Leverage whatever you've got to leverage. Leverage your cellar door. I mean, we find at Wirra that our cellar doors are the most effective as a funnel of bringing people into your brand in terms of D2C. But we're finding really good success with social media lately.
Just while you've got the mic, this isn't a question, but I guess just a follow-up from my perspective. You've done some really interesting, what I call thought pieces over the last few months. Must take a lot of your weekend time to come up with that. Does that, that's through LinkedIn primarily, does that help drive people to your brand as well? Your brand is in Wirra, not brand Matt Della?
I don't know, but probably not at a consumer level. I think when I'm dealing with trade and media globally, they like the type of things that I'm talking about, and it gives them a sort of warm, fuzzy feeling towards me. So that's fine. It's not why I do it. It's because I've got 2 kids on the spectrum and I need a break sometimes. But
fair enough.
I enjoy it. I do it because I enjoy it, and the other stuff flows on from it.
Still a few here to get through. What support can JMG provide to exporters to raise awareness and increase demand in specific international markets where Australian wines are underrepresented? I'm not sure if that is actually within the remit of the JMG, if I'm honest. That's probably Wine Australia along with states and regions and Austrade's job. And I think hopefully that's sort of what we talked about over the last hour or so earlier today with what those plans look like. There is ongoing discussions around EMDG style programs and what that could potentially look like. But again, that's outside of the remit of both Wine Australia and the JMG. So I'm not sure we can provide much more of an answer to that one. Are there any plans to collaborate with Tourism Australia for a unified approach when promoting Australian wine in international markets? Again, I might take that one. We try very hard to collaborate with Tourism Australia where we can. Certainly, I know Laura in the UK office has a close working relationship. I know Erin within the North American market. We've done work with TA in the past. We took the opportunity with the new Australian wine brand to reach out, to talk to them in some detail about what we were doing, how we were doing it, and how we thought food and wine, particularly wine, played a strong role in inbound visits program. They were very comfortable with the positioning that we've got to, but we haven't seen it yet in a material way be incorporated into what they're doing. But it's certainly a question that we keep asking.
I'll just add something to that. I mean, it can happen at an individual level. And, I reached out to Laura, Jewel, when we wanted to do something with Waitrose. And she connected me with South Australian Tourism, and they got Flight Centre donate accommodation and land package, and Malaysian Airways to donate the flight. So for the price of an ad in Waitrose magazine, we were able to offer a winter trip to Wirra in the UK, and I think that was it's been a very successful program, and so it doesn't have to necessarily be en masse. It can be using those connections at an individual level as well.
We had a few questions before lunch today around no-low, mid-strength, etc. So I'll bundle them all into one. What's the panel's view on mid-strength wine?
Was the question, what's the panel's view on mid-strength wine? Much aligned to my previous response, I think that we need to evolve how we view wine and make sure that we're accommodating kind of different consumers' occasions and need states and flavour preferences in how wine shows up. So all for mid-strength wine, zero alcohol wine. I think it's just up to us as an industry to make sure that we're committing to quality and that we're showing up in a really, really positive way for consumers to keep them in the category, whether it's them coming in via mid-strength, zero or full strength.
Yeah, and not wanting to contradict you, Amber, but which I agree with what you said. I think we did have discussion around, the focus should be on mid rather than low, and the industry grows grapes to turn into wine, and therefore to produce a zero alcohol wine just seemed sort of counterintuitive to what the industry stands for. You can make a manufactured zero based product. So I think the directive was, or the suggestion was, that the focus should absolutely be on low alcohol rather than zero alcohol, and that's what I think Peter and his team focus on with the research primarily.
And that's from a research base and an investment point of view. Yeah.
I think across the board, and because I represent a grand scale of wineries with different sizes, across the board innovations, some will be really relevant for some businesses and some completely won't. That's where we're looking at, across this group, we have a diverse range of stakeholder interests. So we are looking at mid and low, but I think also the category needs to talk more about the innovations in winemaking styles, in lighter styles, whether it's alcohol beverage or not, and really trying to changing storytelling to match what consumers are looking for. But again, it's not every innovation is suitable for every company. It's really looking at your business models and where you want to be in a consumer's eyes.
I'll just agree with both Emma and Erin, but in the sense that, think about what your brand authority is. And Brown Brothers' brand authority is, it has a DNA of innovation. Wirra's brand authority is a lot tighter. So if we rolled out mid-strength church block, I think it would freak everyone out. So innovation for us is church block Shiraz. So think about what your consumer permission is amongst your core and your loyalists.
Spot on. I've got two questions here, and actually I'm going to go slightly off-piste because this is a question from earlier today, and just a thumbs up or a thumbs down will be fine. So to the Endeavour team over there, is Endeavour seeing any demand for or move toward chilled red wines? That would be a yes. So whoever asked the question, if you'd like more information, hunt down the Endeavour guys in a few minutes. Thank you. And lastly, and this is actually, it was again from this morning, but I think it's actually relevant for this afternoon. So a comment, I worked at Dan Murphy's. At Dan's, I met many customers who felt wine isn't for me. Perception shapes reality. So what are we going to do to change that? I actually reckon that's a better question for you guys. And I think given what we've just talked about with the various platforms.
That's a big question. I think it's not even just wines just for me. I mean, we're seeing in export markets around the world, Australian wines not for me. And we really have to work hard, everybody in the industry, Wine Australia, the states, the regions, the wineries, to change that perception. And I think there isn't one solution to it. I mean, in McLaren Vale, we're sort of changing the narrative about how we talk about some of our key varieties to dispel the myth that they all look the same or they all look a style that's no longer desirable by consumers. So it is that brand storytelling and getting across consumers' minds to try something again. But I don't know how you convert people to wine. I think it's a lot easier to convert to an Australian wine category or certain wine category than it is to convert a beer drinker to wine. That's probably more for some of my colleagues.
I think it definitely comes back to occasion, though, which is what we've been talking about. How do we make wine more relevant for more occasions? If wine's not for me, we'll find a wine that is, or an occasion that is.
I think also as an industry, we need to treat consumers with respect, and if they don't want to be converted, we're not the Seventh-day Adventists. So I think it's about making wine as amazing as possible, and people will come. There's interesting little sort of pockets of hope. Gen Z are massively into fragrances, and so just highlighting that wine is about fragrances could be an opportunity. But I think it's just being awesome, and then bringing and then creating the space to bring people in, but not shouting at people these days.
Same question. Probably my only add would be trial is a huge opportunity, and I think since COVID, we've seen less opportunity to do kind of the traditional trial mechanics, say in-store tastings and things like that with the general population. But I think trial is so important to actually convince people that there is a wine for them rather than just tell them. And so I think interesting creative ways in which we can get in front of the consumer with our great tasting wines, we see more often than not drives conversion.
Looks like Katie's hanging off my left shoulder. You've heard
Subtle.
the band.
Subtle.
So maybe just to wrap up, could I, Paul? Firstly, just to say that if you don't know who the members of the JMG are, then reach out to Paul's team. It covers they're in every state, every wine-producing state at least, or not Queensland, but the rest, and cover a diverse areas of the business. So reach out to them if you'd like, and they can bring messages back into the group. And then finally, just like to thank the JMG members who all volunteer their time with the support of their either family businesses or their owners. And I think that's a good thing that we've got that group of people involved. So thank you.
Thank you so much, team. You've actually given me some ammo for some battles I'm having with mainstream media editors about the types of stories we should be telling. So I'm going to go in batting next week, armed with some of your insights. Thank you, Paul, for your help as well. We are on time. Yes, this is a miracle. I had such clock anxiety sitting in my little chair there, but we've done it. I would just like to invite Dr. Martin Cole with some final words. Networking drinks are happening next door, and then after that, if you want to continue the conversations, there's space at the Exeter from 5:45 onwards. So you're welcome to take a seat there too. Thank you so much for your attention. What a great crowd.
Thanks, Katie. How about I do the quickest wrap-up you've ever heard just by thanking a few people. How good was it to have the Endeavour folks sharing that sales data? Absolutely awesome. Thanks, guys. Andrew mentioned his thought leadership piece from the Future Leaders program. If you haven't read it, it is worth a read, genuinely. It's a great piece. Thank you, Sheds. Lee, you gave us a brilliant whistle-stop tour of the Opportunities Estates as well. And Tim shared, I think, a sneak peek at the report that I think we're all on pins to now read the full report in a couple of weeks' time. So thank you, guys. James did, I think, a brilliant job on the on-premise and domestic. I think he had to step out, but the opportunities in New South Wales and Queensland kind of rang pretty good, clear and loud there. So hopefully the dashboard team, Sandy and Angelica, made a lot of sense. We're trying to desperately get stuff in the form that is very usable and can be communicated. So you'll be seeing more and more of that. I think the domestic, Paul shared the domestic campaign. It's very much been a team effort. I think the interesting thing there will be, we're hoping that the Aussie psyche will really get behind that and really go, given all what's in the press about the difficulties of the sector, you never know, there might be a real bump there from consumers really wanting to buy local and support the industry. So let's hope so. You heard a little bit from Julian about the why ESG is important. That's a trend that's not going to go away. You heard from the shortest W07 you've ever seen in your life, Peter Bailey, on his global outlook. I think, and then the team, how good was it to have the international team here? Thank you guys for being here this week and being part of the tech conference as well next week. Fantastic to have you guys here. So good overview of what we're doing in the international scene. James gave a good snapshot of what they're doing to try and support wine exports through the financing. And then how good was the panel? I mean, so thank you guys for a brilliant panel. But also, Nick, thank you again. Thank you and the panel for just a brilliant expertise that they give voluntarily through the joint marketing group. So two people I do want to thank. I want to thank Paul and Katie for helping us through today. And lastly, well done. And lastly, on your tables, there's some resource guide things. So that's a one-stop shop for all of the dashboards, the market export guides. Take a flick through it. If you are at the tech conference next week, come and see us. Leave a business card, and we'll make sure you can connect with the right people. Even 007 will be there if you need him to be. But come and see us. And the last thing is thank all of you for attending today. I think what we set out to do today was to really tell that story that we are, at a pivotal point here. And the key theme, I think, is really listening to the consumers and the market insights in terms of driving everything that we do. So thanks again for today, and let's have some wine. Thank you.